Thank you very
Take your
much.
time.
Yes. So I'll speak today in English, which is a good thing since I don't actually speak Greek at all. So please bear with me. And today I will talk from the perspective of an investor, essentially, because CIMMYT is an organization that is actually a consortia of academic medical centers in the Boston area, in universities, so MIT, Harvard, etc. And what we do is we find, fund, and facilitate projects. And the first speaker spoke so eloquently about the transition from academia into something that's actually real. So all of my experience is healthcare-centric, so I'll speak from that vantage point. But the ideology, the sentiment, the things that matter in terms of the entrepreneurial ecosystem cut across absolutely all industries. So I'll speak again from the vantage point of healthcare, but these will be broad concepts. So CIMMYT, just a little advertisement for CIMMYT. We, as I said, find, fund, and facilitate projects. So the projects that sit squarely in academia have to cross something known as the Valley of Death. How many people, show of hands, have heard of the Valley of Death? Right. So this is that ambiguous zone that needs to be crossed by these projects that have been funded very squarely by grants in the academic setting that need to cross this valley into something that is a startup company that is funded by institutional commercial money. And this is where many, many, many projects die. That's why it's called the Valley of Death. And the Valley of Death is littered with great technologies that have failed for many different reasons, some of which we'll talk about here. So anyway, this is a theme I'll come back to during the brief discussion. I think, unfortunately, I am the only thing standing between the results that everybody is waiting for, and so yes, you have the best. Right. So CIMMYT, we have evaluated since 2010 about 250 projects. We've worked on impact plans, which are essentially business plans for academic early stage projects, about 100 of those. And the way it works is that each project that an impact plan is developed for has a prime mover who is essentially the CEO of that project and develops a business plan to make that academic project more commercializable. So our success rate is actually pretty good. We have about a 41% commercialization rate. And so when I say commercialization, I don't mean into the market. Because in healthcare, there's a huge gaposis between something that is commercially, directionally oriented and actually something that is accepted into patient care. So the term commercialization is loose, arguably. But that's happened over 19 months. So how many people in the audience are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs? Should be a lot of people, or else so selected we wouldn't be here, right? Obviously. So for those who have not experienced it, entrepreneurship and commercialization is a path of agony and ecstasy, and on a given day, it's both or one. So in healthcare, it starts out like, okay, we've got a great problem. That's the agony, but it's an opportunity. So we have a great problem, and we have a solution, and we have a grant, and wow, we found out the solution works, and oh, by the way, we filed a patent. Oh my God, that's, wait, but there's already a patent for it. Okay, that's terrible. But wait, okay, we have freedom to operate, so we're good, you know, and we have built this product, and the first test worked. What? Oh no, I'm sorry. The first test didn't work, so now we have a problem, but okay, we've developed a fix for it, so it works again. What? But the customers hated the old fix, the new fix, and they want the old thing, but the old thing doesn't work, so we redesigned it. Okay, so we're back in ecstasy, life is good, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we've already experienced all of this stuff. But what? The investors want how much? They want what % of the company? No way, forget about it. Oh, well, okay, we finally agree on some terms, but now what? The FDA and the EU regulatory bodies say we have to do what in terms of All of these tests, there's absolutely no way, but okay. We're a good team, bunch of MIT guys, and we can do this. But okay, we're behind schedule. Okay, but users like it, so we're doing okay. So we're going to add some more resources, and then everything fails in the field, and we are back to the agony. But we do have regulatory approval. We have real orders, but now there's competition because everything took so long. So life is terrible again. And this roller coaster that you go on is something that I've experienced personally, and is the only thing that is guaranteed in an entrepreneurial environment. So how do you get through this? How do you get through this? Irrational persistence. You will hear this term a lot. Irrational persistence. My wife says I'm just irrational. I try to tell her I'm being irrationally persistent, sweetheart. It's okay. She doesn't agree. So irrational persistence is the thing that get, but it's not blind irrational persistence. It's enlightened irrational persistence. Enlightened irrational persistence. So in healthcare, we suffer from many great things, or we have many great things, and we suffer from many opportunities. So the standard of care, let's see, can I do this? Oh, wonderful. So the standard of care is always where we start, and those of you that are developing biotech devices know this, and healthcare products. The clinical opportunity, is identified. New technologies are potentially developed. You develop a proof of principle, a proof of value, products, services. Clinical practice needs to be there to be implemented to affect the standard of care, and the cycle repeats. But at every gate, there's a brick wall. Every single gate, there's a brick wall. There are so many wonderful ways to fail in healthcare. And at every turn, you can fail. And you can fail even though it's going great. Like the race car driver. He's Mario Andretti, and he's number one, right until he hits the wall. And then, nothing. So you can fail because of an incorrect needs assessment. Small opportunity. You can read this, I won't belabor it. But there's 19 ways to Sunday to fail. And in healthcare, as in some other areas that are regulated, we suffer from a triumvirate of risk. And software companies, I'm so envious of these transportation companies that have no technology. Please use my term loosely. It's software, you can develop it, but there's no regulatory risk. In healthcare, we suffer from this tremendously. Market, regulatory, technology, reimbursement in many countries. So there are many ways to fail. And here are some. Okay, and you can read these, maybe not, bad location. So this is not a healthcare specific list. This is some CB insights, which I recommend to you just to cure insomnia. So ignoring customers, losing focus, arguing between the investors and the team, that never happens, a pivot gone bad. So what's the number one reason why CB Insights found that early stage companies or startups fail? That was a less than rhetorical question. Please, what do you think? Run out of money. That's a good one. Is that up there? Survey says. Let's see. Okay. The number one reason is no market, too much coffee. No market need. No market need. What does that mean? That means somebody went out and built something that nobody cares about, right? Nobody cares about your whiz-bang technology. I can say this, I'm from MIT. It's a whiz-bang technology that nobody cares about. So what? So what? So why does this happen? We're all smart. Why does that happen? Well, could it be as we suffer from tremendously in academic medical centers and in universities, technology push versus clinical pull. So when we evaluate projects, and we work with Brigham and Women's and MIT and Harvard Medical School and BU Medical School and man's greatest hospital, Massachusetts General Hospital, as they like to call themselves, the number one thing that we always point on before we invest, and we invest in kind, and we invest up to $500,000, $250,000 in a project, and then run it as CEO. The biggest thing we ask and try to tease out is the so what problem. Is this a technology looking for a home, or is there actually an identified clinical problem that this is trying to solve? In academia, the goals are different than in startups. Many times the academicians want to stay in academia, which is perfectly legitimate. They want to publish papers and improve clinical care, but any research is good research and simplifying assumptions are okay. Not so, says industry, right? Where you have to have a complete solution where R&D must translate into sales, and the goal is to make money and improve patient care. So, a third reason why this happens sometimes, why startups may fail, is because the market risk is delayed temporarily from the technology risk. This is easy. We're all trained to do this. It's not easy, but we're trained to do it. We have PhDs that spend years doing this. Wonderful. This is the goal. We have to slide the market risk earlier in time. And what does that actually mean? What does it mean to de-risk the market? The market de-risking means that you understand your customers intimately. Intimately. You know what they look like naked. You know what they think about when they go to sleep at night. If you had to be one, you almost could. I'm not a doctor, but I play one on television. Right? It's you understand their buying process. You understand the benefits that you have. And this is even before you have a product. Even before you have a product, you have a well-identified, well-articulated need. That translates into success. So market de-risking is one of the most important things that early stage projects and startups need to do. Okay, so what is a startup? A startup is a company, I love this. A startup is a company that's confused about what its product is, who its customers are, and how it makes money. And this from smart people, right? But there's massive amount of confusion on a daily basis. Startups are smaller versions of larger companies. Wrong. All you need to do is to develop a business plan and make a spreadsheet. No offense to the teams that made wonderful spreadsheets and had hockey stick projections, right? This is what I need to do. Not as a startup. Now, in all deference, these companies had revenue, which is amazing. That's wonderful. So having revenue projections is very legitimate. For startup companies, those two are not together. For startups versus companies, startups do not equal companies. Startups need to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. This is what startups do. And they are temporary organizations because a startup graduates to what? A company. Companies are not startups. Startups are startups that are searching. So, market de-risking, customer discovery, and search are terms that I'll use interchangeably. And this is so relevant because this is the crux of the matter that is the first gate for us to determine which companies, or which projects rather, we even want to hear another layer of pitch from. If the people in the room that talk to us cannot articulate their need, it doesn't matter their technology. So search is what startups do, or early projects do. They discover, and we'll talk about this, and when they validate their problem, the need and their solution and the value proposition of their solution. If their hypotheses were wrong, they pivot and start all over again. Okay. Search starts with an itch. You develop a scratcher to scratch the itch. People will pay money for the scratcher to scratch their itch. And that is where your great stuff is. You're developing a scratcher that's better than all the other scratchers, or is a new scratcher that no one ever thought of before. So, to do that, we must define the business Holy Trinity, which is, what is your value, for whom, and how is this monetized? This is the fundamental basis for absolutely everything that a startup and a subsequent company will do. Get this wrong, and you may last, but you will have tricked the investors. Which, anyway. So, customer discovery. Search. It's a contact sport. It means you got to get out of the lab and into the world. Get out of the lab and into the world. Define your potential customers. Who are the users in medicine? The difference between a user and a buyer is surgeons use products, but they don't buy products. Right? Radiologists use products, but unless you have a very specific set of circumstances, radiologists don't buy products. They recommend to the on-high gods that make the decision. Who are those people? Right? The value committee within the hospital, the CEO of the private practice group, which in some cases is a radiologist or a surgeon, but that's potentially a small market, or potentially that's your market. But unless you understand the problems that they face and have mapped out who these people are, what their problems are, and the value of your solution, your company will face many difficulties raising funds. So, discover the needs and the blah, 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 blah. Okay, so define the ecosystem now and after your innovation. If you need to articulate what is being done now and how do you disrupt that, right? You need to understand, as I say, a day in the life of your customers. Follow the money. Follow the money. Having a great value does not mean you have a business. And I'll discuss that in a little bit. How am I doing on time?
Everybody's hanging for reviews.
Yeah, hardly. They're just waiting for the results of, okay. So listen, this is one, I love this. Listen to what you're told, not what you want to hear. You're sitting in a room and all of your customers are going, yes, that's my problem. And then two people are talking aside, I swear, Bob, I swear he said no. Did you hear him say no? Yeah, I heard him say no. Because no is what I have on my slides. Yeah. Not so. But this is really, really hard, particularly for us that have been very well educated and are very, very well vested in our ideas. And we have data to support that, right? I have papers, I have grants. Come on, I have a solution. Papers and grants are great, period. End of story, right? Great, it's wonderful. It's what supports our academic systems. But to translate those projects into the world, into businesses, is something completely different. So you have to listen to what you're being told, not what you want to hear. And have a tough skin, because you know what? Your baby's kind of ugly. Right? Your baby may be pretty, but you have to find out who your baby is pretty to and just how pretty is pretty. So, One of the best ways to do this is using something called the business model canvas, which I'll make a reference to in a little bit, but this is a nice one-page business plan, essentially. If you Google BMC or business model canvas, you'll get an infinite number of hits. This is, I've forgotten his name, but Osterwalder, thank you. So he has developed this nice canvas. There are many different frameworks. This one I happen to like, because hidden in here is the triumvirate, right? The Holy Trinity. What is your value, to whom, and how are you going to monetize that? How are you going to make money? But keep in mind, what you write down here is not necessarily correct. These are guesses until they are validated. These are guesses until they are validated. And if you don't listen to what you're being told, it only delays the time in which the shark bites you. The shark will bite. It's only a question of when. How much money will you have spent before that happens? How many investors will you have pissed off before the shark bites you? So, searching is an iterative analytical methodology. We learned everything about analytical methodologies, right? In school. But somehow we never seem to want to translate those into business, because business, right, it's not an academic pursuit. It sounds like I'm beating up on academics today. That's not my intention at all. I'm merely trying to boost up the importance of being rigorous as we are in science. We need to be as early as possible in business. This can only help. So develop a hypothesis, test the hypothesis, and pivot if you're wrong. So you're wrong. Right? What's the worst that can happen? It's the smart entrepreneur that says, wow, whew, I missed that one totally. Or, you know what, I really thought I was right about that, but you know what? I'm not. I'm not right about that. So searching means you have to define who your customers are. That is, in the ecosystem now, and I'll give several examples in healthcare where this is not always apparent. Okay? Who will pay? People can say, oh, great idea. Yes, love that. Oh, there's no way I would pay for that. Oh, great idea. You go, like when they say, this tie looks really good on you. But oh no, I would never wear that tie. So who are the decision makers? Okay, so let me give you an example. This is the company that I co-founded. So this was a company, and we made a molecular imaging product, okay? So we tagged fibrinogen, which is a protein involved in the clot formation. So we tagged that with a nuclear agent to make it light up on a nuclear scan. And the first application was for lower GI bleeding, okay? So as it turns out, although it's not a glamorous topic to discuss colonic bleeding, it turns out it's a very big problem. So people do what they need to do. They stand up and they notice that the throne, the bowl that they've been sitting on for some time reading the paper or what have you, is filled with blood, and they freak out and they call their doctors. So colonic bleeding, that's the way it manifests. And so they rush to the emergency department, and now a whole bunch of tests are being done on this patient. So they'll either go for a colonoscopy, they'll go for a tagged red blood cell scan, or they'll go to the cath lab for an angiography, all to determine where in the colon, and there's only about 2 meters of your colon, which goes up here and then out. It's very small. It can be imaged pretty well, but we can't figure out where the colonic bleeding is coming from. So This is a flow chart of mapping all of these things, and here's real data. So the accuracy of the current test ranges from 32% to 92%. That means we either know or we have no idea. And it costs a lot of money and 2 days in the hospital, da-da-da-da-da. Okay? So our solution identified all of the stakeholders in this, and we wanted to simplify it to this. So that we change the clinical flow, we change the clinical decision-making opportunities from this complex web and iterative labyrinth of tests. And I love this, down at the end of this long flow chart, where you could do this test or this test or this. Yeah, well, do something else. In other words, try it again, because that's all we know how to do. So we wanted to simplify that and decrease the cost, increase the accuracy, decrease the speed, improve the treatment, da-da-da-da-da. Okay. So this is mapping the ecosystem that we hoped to disrupt. But when you search, and I alluded to this earlier, if you go out with the best of intentions and an unknowing bias and say, hey, you want some ice cream? What are people going to say? Of course I want ice cream. But if you ask them and observe, do you want this ice cream in these flavors that parenthetically costs €200, the answer may be, heck no. So how you search, how you define the problem, and the inherent biases in your data collection are critically important to your true understanding of the problem. And from your true understanding of the problem, you can develop a value proposition. So just because you have a product doesn't mean that there's a need that that product satisfies. This is a product. This is a problem. If there's no problem, you can maybe get a lot of grants because there's some fundamental research in here, which is great, but it may not be solving a problem that is large enough and sustainable enough to fund essentially a startup. So, and just because you have a solution doesn't mean that that solution actually has value to the target customer. So, you must identify the customer's pain. Does your solution or proposed solution actually identify and solve a pain? And does it really solve the pain? When you stand and look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself objectively, based upon the data that you've in as objective as a way possible gathered, does your solution really satisfy a pain? Painkillers in general are better than gain creators. Your product could do something better, like make me run faster, vitamins, but if I have a headache, I will pay you money on the spot. I may be far less inclined to pay you money for a benefit that I might get. Maybe I can eat a banana instead before my run, which I do, and it helps. Right? But if I have a headache, a banana is not going to cure that headache. So, value propositions are things in the healthcare world that are improved efficiency or performance, reduced costs, reduced risk, improved revenue, speed, efficiency. So, for my company, we had improved diagnosis of lower GI bleeding. So with or without active bleeding, that was a big thing clinically. Is this patient bleeding or are they not bleeding? That turns out to be a very critical thing. And there's significant value that gastroenterologists and emergency room doctors put upon the ability to have a test that was working with and without active bleeding, and then improved treatments. So because the diagnosis was better, we were able to better improve treatments. But we had to identify who these value propositions were actually providing value for. And this is an inextricably linked, completely interactive thing. Your value is always to somebody. You don't have value or a value proposition in the absence of that. So, I'd like to draw another difference. Just because you have value doesn't mean you have a value proposition. What is a value proposition? A value proposition is a differentiated. That means nobody can copy it, or they're going to have a hard time copying it. Or it has regulatory approval when others don't. Or there's some algorithmic difference that you have, and that's always a sustainable, differentiatable advantage. Differentiate sustainable values for a cost bearable by target customers. It's not the absolute value of value, pardon the pun, it's the benefit to cost ratio. How does my life change for the worse if I buy your kit? How does my life, what are the hidden costs that you're not telling me about? Okay, so here's a great example. A clinical software platform to help gather and track patient information between visits. Who wouldn't want that? Oops. Right? And then longitudinally plot the response to medications. Oh, okay, that's great. That's a nice value prop. But okay, all right. Well, maybe actually, how much better is it than the current standards? So, is it a lot better, or is it I would like to have that? Is it a must-have, or is it I would like to have that? And if it's a platform, which we spend many years as PhD students, I don't have a PhD, developing platforms. That's the thing, right? But platforms suffer from the fact that you have to develop a first application for that. So, okay, is the value of this platform the same for all clinical applications? And then, does it help me, as the economic buyer, to increase revenue or decrease cost? Actually, when you take into account everything? And actually, is it much better than my electronic medical record or my, that should be EHR, electronic health record? And then actually, if I want to buy your solution in addition to the EMR that I have, does it integrate? And what are the true costs? Do I have to hire another person to manage that software? So value does not equal value proposition. Another one, this one I love. MRI-Guided Device. It's a new MRI-guided device to help radiologists better target and differentiate cancer when doing prostate biopsies. So prostate biopsies are notoriously bad. So that's a clinically defined need. So this is TRUS, so I didn't write that. So the current ultrasound devices, how much actually better is it? And this fundamental issue, radiologists, unless they're interventional radiologists, don't do biopsies. They don't handle tissues. What do radiologists do? They sit in a dark room and they look at television screens all day. And they get paid massive amounts of money to differentiate cancer or bad things from not bad things. But now suddenly this device is going to make them handle tissue? I don't want to do that. So great technology, but maybe there's no business, right? And by the way, will the urologists that actually currently do it, are they going to be mad at the radiologists for taking their business? Yes, at least in the United States. And so how will they respond? And what is the total cost? So is it worth it? Okay, so these are great examples of technologies that are actually in our boot camp, which we're running right now. I was on a conference call prior to coming here. We run a boot camp through CIMMIT where we ask the teams to go out and explore these businesses. So it's a boot camp totally focused on commercialization, setting aside the technology. So this is my shining example, okay? We always think technology leadership, technology innovation. That is true, period, full stop. However, Innovation can happen in many different ways if you understand the problems that your target customers have. Okay? Great example. Pill pack. Look it up. Pill pack. Instead of going to the pharmacy and getting a bottle of X because you have a prescription that you got from your doctor, you take your prescription for all of your medications and you send it online to PillPack. PillPack uses no high-tech solution at all, a sealing machine to put your daily recommended or your daily prescribed medicines in a pouch. They mail it to your house, you unpack it, and you get a very specific, pre-sorted, individualized pack that you tear open and take. So particularly for the elderly, I have a mother who is quite ill. Medication management is huge. Okay? So this company has zero technology advantage. They developed this company all by listening to their target customers. And guess what? First of all, it was a pharmacist and an MIT guy that developed the company. Bam! $50 million in VC funding. This is B round. Zero technology advantage. They listened to their customers. They understood what? The problem. There's a saying, it takes just as much energy and effort to solve a small problem as it does a big problem. So the problem definition, particularly in healthcare, is huge. And understanding that viscerally is the most important thing. That triumvirate is key. So, entrepreneurs, these are all of us. I may or may not look like this. The most important job, discover, validate, and pivot. And don't be afraid to pivot. With customer discovery and enlightened, irrational persistence, you can actually build something that somebody cares about. So, this talk, this is the fine print. This talk borrows heavily from Lean Launchpad methodology, used to blank, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's it. I hope I didn't overstay my welcome, but please, it was my pleasure.